welcome back to another episode of She Talks Business. We are wrapping up this season with Mackenzie and turning the tables today. And I am going to ask her some questions about her business. So, if you are new to listening and you have not heard our previous conversations, let me tell you a little bit about Mackenzie. First and foremost, she is my niece. Mackenzie St. Laurent is a wellness counselor who specializes in the menstrual cycle and is on a mission to serve those who struggle with period problems through holistic practices. She uses her background in psychology and diploma in wellness counseling to help people feel heard and offer alternative solutions so they can not only feel their best, but have a better period naturally. Mackenzie, welcome to the show in the other seat.
I'm so happy to be on this side.
Yeah. All right. So, Mackenzie, what is it that you do? I'm going to come from the place of being old school. Old school was, you get your period. Yeah, you get cramps, you suck it up, you move on. And now there's this whole world of, cycle syncing and really paying attention to where you're at in the cycle. And I hear people talk about, not only their cycle, but the cycle of the moon and all this stuff. So give us like a high level kind of description of what is it that you aspire to do in terms of helping people?
This is a great question. I aspire to help people to understand their body and understand their period in a way that doesn't make them the problem or think that their period needs to be that way their entire life. I think in modern medicine, the period is seen as a problem, and there are very few options that are given, and there's very little education. So it's kind of a top down issue because we're getting our education and knowledge from doctors that haven't gotten the education on periods because it's not really well researched. So I'm really looking to offer an alternative space for people to talk about what's going on with their period and really understand it. And that's where my background in psychology really comes in, is that the emotional and physical symptoms that are happening are telling you something about your overall health, your well-being, your emotional state, whether you're burnt out. And it's not something that we're just going to throw the pill at. So really shifting the focus from the period just being something that we push aside to the corner to something that's a missing piece in a lot of people's lives, of just understanding how they can care for themselves.
There are a lot of emotional and physical pains, limitations that can come along with a woman's cycle. So, for people listening, what's normal and what's not? How do you know when you should be getting some type of support, advisement in terms of how you're managing your own cycle?
So first, I would say that period cramps are actually not normal. They're common, but they are not normal. And we've been really conditioned to think that we're just meant to live in pain, and that because a lot of people experience cramps, that they are normal. But there is a difference between common and normal. So I would say anytime that your pain or your emotional disruption is interfering with your day-to-day life, is a great time to just get some support, and to not stop at your GP, and to not just stop, like really look for the answers and really advocate for yourself. But anytime that your period is causing distress is a great time to just talk to even your friends, your mom, like just start talking about what's going on for you and seeking some answers. And it really comes from a place of deciding for yourself that you don't want to live in pain all the time, and that you don't have to.
There's a statistic that you shared with me on how many visits it takes someone. Can you share that? What is that?
Yeah, it's on average 7 different medical practitioners in a decade to get any kind of diagnosis when it comes to the cycle. So whether it's endometriosis, PCOS, amenorrhea, anything cycle related, it takes on average a decade and 7 different medical practitioners.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that women should be seeking out support from female practitioners in general when it comes to their cycle, or do you think it makes a difference?
I don't think it makes a difference because unfortunately there is so little education that unless that female practitioner has done, it is a lot of self-education where we're at right now societally. So unless that practitioner has done the research on themselves or sought out that education, I would say looking for a practitioner who actually listens to what you're saying and comes with curiosity rather than just trying to throw the pill, or maybe surgical options at you, really looking for a practitioner who's listening to the fact that that there's not something that's not right with your body.
And you talk about there being four phases to the cycle. Can you tell us what that is? And then can you maybe connect it like what does cycle syncing mean?
Yeah, so there are four phases of the menstrual cycle. So we talk about the menstrual phase the most because that's your bleed. That's the one we're most um, aware of, the one we talk about the most, but we're actually always in our cycle. So whether you're on your period or not, you are always within your menstrual cycle. It's not something that comes and goes. So then after your menstrual phase, it's called your follicular phase. So your hormones are rising, your energy is rising, your mood is probably starting to feel better. And that lasts from the end of your bleed to ovulation. And ovulation is a shorter phase, and that is when the egg is released from the ovary. And that is when you're probably feeling your best. I think anyone who has a cycle knows that there's days where you're like, wow, I love my hair, my skin's glowing, I feel really confident, I want to connect with people. That's your ovulation time. You might feel some pain, it's called middle schmerz or middle pain. That is common. If you do experience that, it's also good to check it out. And then after that is your luteal phase. So your hormones start to descend, progesterone starts to rise. And that's when you're feeling probably not the best. So your mood, your energy, your sensitivity is probably higher. That's what we refer to as PMS, so the premenstrual phase. That's when those symptoms really start to come in, whether they're physical or emotional. And then you're back to your period. So those are the four phases in a nutshell. And each of those phases have a corresponding season that we refer to in cycle syncing. So menstrual is like really your inner winter. Follicular is kind of like spring, ovulation, summer, and luteal is fall. So cycle syncing is the practice of syncing your kind of self-care, your movement, your nutrition, your socializing, really syncing your life to what's going on in your body at that time. So it really promotes that relationship with self to know where you're at in your period. And it's not about letting it dictate your life, but letting it inform the decisions you make based on what's going on for you.
So why would someone want to do uh, like a coaching program with you? Like why would they come? Why would somebody seek out your help? What are some of the biggest challenges that people have, and how do you believe you can help them?
Mm. The biggest challenges that I see people who menstruate have is feeling like they're out of control of their emotions. They're in a lot of pain, so pain that's sending them to the hospital, just feeling completely out of balance and feeling like their menstrual cycle is really running their life. And that is when I love to come in because at that point, the options that we are provided with are very limited. So, working with me, we take a really holistic view of what's going on, especially the emotional side. My background in psychology really helped me to see that we pathologize the period a lot. We make it a problem. So if someone's experiencing PMS symptoms, they have PMS rather than, okay, why are those emotions coming up? So working with me, it's really a safe space to talk about what's going on, address those issues. Maybe you're not eating enough, maybe you're not sleeping enough. So really just taking care of the self and having the support of one-on-one during that time, especially it can feel really isolating as someone who has experienced both PMDD which is premenstrual dysphoric disorder. So lovingly referred to as PMS on steroids. It can really, really affect your whole life. Um, that there is somewhere that you can talk about what's going on and that you'll be heard and validated rather than just told, oh, that's just because you have PMS. So, an example that I use a lot is there's a lot of anger in the luteal phase, but we don't feel our emotions for no reason. I've never met someone who has an emotion for no reason. They're messengers. So, having someone to hold you during that and to give you the tools to actually emotionally regulate, understand your anger, find an outlet for it rather than just saying, oh, you have a problem. That's really where I like to come in as a menstrual wellness counselor.
So, what exactly is wellness counseling in comparison to, say, therapy? How would you differentiate the two?
I love this question. Um, Wellness counseling is a approach to it's more holistic. It's considering nutrition, it's considering movement, and not that counseling can't, but traditional counseling is a lot more processing trauma. So in wellness counseling, it's not about processing the past. So we're not going to sit together and go into your childhood. We might visit it, but we're not going to live there. Whereas, so wellness counseling is really about the present moment. It's got an element of coaching, an element of the counseling, and figuring out blocks to being well. So the focus is on getting you somewhere, whereas counseling, there isn't really a focus on moving a dial forward. It's a lot gentler, I would say. Not that wellness counseling isn't gentle, but I would say those are the big differences.
So, therapy is more looking back, and wellness counseling is more looking forward, like looking at where you're at and where you want to be, kind of thing.
Exactly.
In
And
simple terms.
yeah, and bringing in I think the reason wellness counseling is called wellness counseling is because wellness can be really emotional. And there is an element of counseling people through the blocks too. What's preventing them from feeling good in their skin, in their body, in their life. But yeah, traditional counseling is a lot more in the past and processing and all of that.
So, if someone is listening to this show and they themselves have some challenges with their cycle, or they have a child that has problems with their cycle, or a partner that has problems with their cycle, can you maybe give us a couple of things that people can do to help themselves feel a bit better right now?
Mm-hmm. The first thing I would say is track your cycle. Track, download an app, do it on paper, whatever works best for you. Because if you don't know your cycle, it's really hard to anticipate and to plan for what you might need to feel better. So, getting to know how long your cycle is, how long your bleed is, how heavy your bleed is, all of this is information that's actually really helpful for if you do end up seeking help. Is being able to say, yes, I know how long it is. Yes, I know that's normal for me. Really creating that relationship with your body. And then typically, what I see with people who have menstrual struggles is they're overworking themselves. They're not resting enough. They're probably really stressed. So, really focusing on where can they de-stress in their lives, and where can they rest more. I've never met someone with menstrual issues who is not doing enough in their lives. So, really focusing on what that pain is telling them, what that emotion is telling them, and just cultivating, knowing that that means that they need some extra care and whatever that looks like for them.
So, what are some things that people can do for extra care for those high achievers that are working too much or working all the time? Like, what are some of the, I mean, I know myself, like I'm a push througher. I'm not a pauser. So, what what are some of the things that you would recommend people do for
Mm,
that self-care?
for doing so, this is where the tracking the cycle really comes in. I would focus on what is your biggest trigger? What is the biggest thing that challenges you for your period? So, for example, if you find you're really, really angry, taking a second when that anger comes up to actually question, like, what are you angry about? What is making you irritable? And taking a journal, taking rather than pushing through that feeling and pushing through being like, oh, I'm just PMSing, and dismissing yourself, taking the time to sit with that feeling and just getting curious. So free writing in your journal, doing a meditation, anything that really goes inward. And if meditating isn't your thing, even just going for a walk, like making time for yourself, especially in that luteal or premenstrual phase, that phase is really meant for going inwards, taking care of yourself. So a great example is saying no when you want to say no. So let's say your partner's like, hun, I really need you to cook dinner tonight. If your tendency is to say yes, even though inside you're like, I really, really angry, or like, I really need to go read a book or something, listen to that feeling. Listen, I think we all have that. We all know what we need, and it comes out sometimes in that irritability of, I really want to do this thing for myself, but I feel like I need to do this for someone else. So finding a balance doesn't have to be every time, but if you can just once in a while start to flip it to, I'm going to choose the thing that I want to do for myself, I think that's a great place to start.
So how do people do that when they've been people pleasers their whole life? How do they start to communicate to someone else that, no, I'm going to do this thing for myself? Because that can feel pretty awkward, I'm sure.
Oh, yes. As someone who has been a people pleaser their whole life, I totally get it. And it really comes back to curiosity of, what is it that where does the should come from? So where does that feeling that you need to be a people pleaser, or what is your fear? Like, what's on the other side of that no? What is your fear that that no will bring you? So sometimes the first step isn't actually saying no. Sometimes the first step is really examining your beliefs about what people pleasing is bringing to your life, or why you feel like you need to say yes all the time. That's really where I think the wellness counseling comes in, is that it goes deeper. And
Mm.
oftentimes with the period, it does, which is why it's so cool. But really getting curious as to why you feel the need to say yes all the time. What do you think is going to happen if you say no?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a great question to ask yourself anytime you feel resistance, right? It's like taking a pause and actually asking yourself, where is this coming from? What am I afraid of? Or what am I what am I worried about that might happen? Or why don't I feel like I can do this? And really doing that self-reflection. So is that the type of thing that you do in your wellness counseling? You help people kind of unpack some of those feelings and get curious about what they are and what they mean?
Yeah, exactly. So really going deeper and getting, it's almost like we're starting here. We're going to go back a little bit to understand what's going on, what's contributing to this, so that you can comfortably move forward. Because trying to move forward when there's something pulling at you just makes you feel stuck. And there was something I was going to say about the saying no, or, oh, the people pleasing part of it is that I read once about being cared for and giving people the opportunity to care for you, because it's a lot more vulnerable to say not just no, but to ask for help. That's a big thing too in the phases, is there's a time for giving and there's a time for receiving, and oftentimes the balance is really skewed. So whenever there's that need to give from an empty place, try to shift the perspective of allowing the people in your life the opportunity to care for you. Because think of how happy it, even with people pleasers, there is an element of wanting to care for others, and giving that person the opportunity to care for you can really help to kind of unstick that belief that you have to always be pleasing.
Mhm. So I know when you were here visiting us, you talked a lot about nutrition and supplements and like what are I get the feeling that what you do is more holistic. Like it's not just about the cycle, but it's about self-care as a whole. What are some of the things like that people should be considering if they're trying to have a more holistic approach to how they care for themselves?
Hmm. I think the really cool thing about the approach through the cycle is, so holistic just means multifaceted. It means it's got it all covered. So really taking a look at the different aspects of your life. So there's this thing called a wellness wheel, and it
Mhm.
covers the different areas of your life. And that's a great place to have a visual of a holistic overview and taking stock of what areas of your life are maybe getting a lot of attention, what areas aren't getting as much attention. And balance is a really hard thing to achieve. It's more like a pendulum than a fixed state. But if something in your life is calling for your attention, it might mean that something else in your life needs a little bit less attention, and being okay with that constant shift. And that's a really holistic way to care for yourself. And then addressing your basic needs. I think we all have basic needs, and knowing that that is the foundation, that's not the afterthought. That is what we start with. So when I work with people, I really encourage them to figure out what are the things that they need daily, weekly, monthly to feel grounded and not even well, but just present in themselves. And that's my approach for the holistic way.
So, what are some of the things that people need in general terms?
Enough sleep. Sleep is overlooked more than any, and women, people who menstruate need more sleep than men do. So 8 hours, it's personal, but more than 8 hours. It's like 9 to 10 hours if you're menstruating. And sleep is the foundation for anything. I see so much about nutrition and working out, and that's great. But if you're not resting enough, the rest is going to be really hard. So, sleep, enough water. Water makes everything in our body work, and it's all really simple things, but not easy. Eating 3 times a day and eating within 30 minutes of waking up, and do not have coffee on an empty stomach. Do not have caffeine on an empty stomach. Your hormones will not be happy. So, really aiming to eat within 30 minutes, maybe an hour. Some people don't wake up with an appetite, but it'll really kickstart your appetite so that you are eating consistently. And hormones love consistency. So, really just focusing on, can I get good sleep every night? Can I get enough water? Can I move my body? And that could just be walking, like being really gentle. We love in our society to go to the extremes, run a marathon, all of this, but just listening to when you need to rest, listening to when you need to eat, not being so disconnected from your body that you're pushing those basic needs aside.
And you talked about, so a couple questions there. First, how much water? Like, how much
Mm.
water should we really be drinking? Because you see all kinds of different things online. So, how much water is reasonable?
I believe there's a calculation you can do based on your weight, but rather than giving a prescriptive answer, I'm gonna offer, when you're thirsty. Like right now, my lips are dry. I can feel that I need some water. So it's really, again, tuning into when you're thirsty, drink some water. But I would say a cup in the morning. If you're getting 1 to 2 liters a day, that's a good start. And then see how your body feels. And also, hydration is a whole other topic, but don't chug your water. It's overwhelming. Like, when people drink a lot of water and they're like, "Oh, I always have to pee." You're just peeing it out because you're drinking too much volume at a time. So it's more just like a consistent throughout the day. Just have a glass of water when you wake up and continue to hydrate yourself. Always have a water bottle with you, that kind of thing.
Okay. You talked about this wellness wheel. What are the different elements of the wellness wheel?
Mm. It's like spiritual, physical, mental, emotional, interpersonal, vocational, so work. And I think there's some other elements in there. Sexual can be in there. So it's really all the aspects of your life fit into this wheel.
And how do you use that wheel to help people?
So it's an exercise, and it's a great visual because you're given this wheel, it's blank, and then you fill in how full you feel in that area of your life. So spiritually, you might feel really connected to your spiritual practice, really connected to a higher power, or you might feel like really lost. You maybe don't have a spiritual connection. So you fill it in, and then you're left with a visual of how full each of these aspects of your life is. So if you're not feeling satisfied with your job, you can see like, oh, I've only got 2 out of 10. And then sometimes that really just helps people to see that they're maybe favoring things over others, or there's places that they feel really fulfilled in, and that's great. And they would love to keep doing those things. And then other areas where they would like to put in not even more work, but just more attention and intention. And then from there, we create a wellness plan of how are we going to balance this out, especially if there's pieces of the pie that are really full and other pieces that are really, really diminished. It's great that that area is full, but you're not going to feel an overall sense of well-being if the balances are kind of out of whack.
And so do you use this wellness wheel in conjunction with cycle syncing when you help people? Like, is there a correlation between the areas of your life on the wellness wheel versus some of the symptoms you might be experiencing from your cycle?
Absolutely. The cycle tells us so much. So it's combining what's going on in your life with your symptoms. And there's almost always a connection. And there's something about seeing the visual of what areas of your life need more attention and then reflecting on the symptoms that you're having and really combining them. And it can be really validating because the menstrual cycle is often pushed to the side and our symptoms are pushed to the side. When you see that there's truth to the way that you're feeling and that there's reality in the wellness wheel or any other exercises that we do, it really helps to validate what people are experiencing throughout their cycle.
Okay, so I have one last question for you. If people are listening right now, so you talked earlier about how to recognize when you might be a candidate for getting support with your cycle. So, what are can you maybe just tell us again, what are some signs that maybe you could use some additional help in terms of I don't managing your cycle might not be the right word, but like understanding what is common versus what is normal and getting the support that you need. So, what are some signs if people are listening and they're thinking, gee, I wonder if that would be helpful for me? I want you to help them to kind of self identify. Can you tell us what those signs would be?
Yeah, so first and foremost would be the cramping, the pain, the severity of the pain. Some mild cramping is normal. There is uterine contractions going on, but if the pain is debilitating, if you're missing work or school, if you're having to take a lot of pain meds to manage, that's a sign that something's going on and that you should seek support, and also that you probably need more rest in your life. Another is the emotional side of it. You don't need to know where you're at in your cycle to know. We've all had that feeling of, I don't know why I'm crying. And then your period comes and you're like, oh, it makes sense. So it's not so much the sensitivity, but if it's disrupting your life, a big thing is interpersonal conflict can happen a lot. So during that premenstrual phase, there's more fights with partners or friends, there's rejection sensitivity. So if you're experiencing anything where you're like, have that question where you're like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't know what's going on. My emotions feel out of whack. My emotions feel like they are outsized. That's also a really good sign that you probably need some support. And extreme fatigue. So that's a big one with the luteal phase, and it's all a balancing act. So if you're feeling like your lows are really, really low, and there's a cyclical nature to it, because that's something that's also missed a lot, is you can experience more depression and anxiety in that second half, and then it goes away with the onset of your period. It can feel really hard to know what to expect. So that's a really great sign that maybe talking to a counselor or a wellness counselor or a doctor, or just starting to get curious about what's going on with your body. And
Yeah.
then another one I would say would be any changes in your bleed. So there's normal for you and then there's abnormal for you. So there's so much variety in the cycle. But if you're starting to notice some changes in length, in pain, in flow that aren't typical for you, that would also be a good time to just check in with a practitioner, whether it's a naturopath or a doctor, and just raise your concerns and never be afraid to raise concerns about your period. It has so much valuable information, and we're really taught to not talk about it unless it's sending us to the hospital, but it doesn't need to be that severe before you ask for support.
And so, if someone would like to have a conversation with you about what that support looks like, what is the best way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, through my website, there's a book a call. You can book a call through there, or you can send me an email at mackenziestlaurent.com and or mackenziestlaurent@gmail.com, and I would be happy to talk to you. I also have an Instagram at msaint, but any way that you'd want to connect, I would be happy to chat.
And what is your website?
mackenziestlaurent.com.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you, Mackenzie. This has been super informative. I know that, I grew up in a different time than you did. And, the options, there were no options for things like this. When I was growing up, went on the pill and you sucked it up and you took Midol and it was what it was. And so I think it's interesting to hear that there are different options available for people today and that there are different ways of looking at this and ways of helping people so that they don't have to spend decades, many, many, many decades of their life in pain. So we appreciate you sharing your knowledge and being an interviewer and a guest on this season of She Talks Business.
And my pleasure. Thank you for the very thoughtful questions.
You are very welcome. So thank you everyone for listening. I hope you got tremendous value from this. I'm curious, Mackenzie, what was your favorite part of this season together?
I think the one about sales was my favorite part so far. Yeah.
Cool. Well, we all like a good sales. We all like a good sale and we all want to be a good salesperson. So that's awesome. All right. Thank you for listening to everyone. And we'll see you next week with a new episode. Thank you for listening.